Katie. Dalton released Katie's nipple from between his lips and slipped his hands beneath her ass, pulling her close, forcing him deeper inside of her. You feel so good. Too good. He had to do elementary math problems in his head just to keep from coming too soon. But she was fire in his arms, and honest to God, he hadn't expected this. Not tonight. Sure, he'd fantasized about it plenty, but to have her wrapped around him, her pussy milking his cock, it was more than he'd imagined, and he never wanted it to end. For a brief moment there, he'd nearly panicked. When he had first slid into her slick heat, he'd been met with resistance. She was so fucking tight, almost painfully so, and that's when a single thought had crossed his mind. Was she a virgin? Was he the first man she'd given herself to? The idea of being her first nearly leveled him. Using his arms, he rocked her forward and back, his cock sliding deeper and then withdrawing only a fraction before he was once again thrusting into her. He was still trying to be gentle, not wanting to hurt her. The tear that had leaked from her eyes had his heart skipping a beat, the thought of hurting her enough to deflate any heart-on. But then she'd begun to move, thrusting her hips forward, sending him deeper. She was so wet, so warm, so very, very tight. He would have much preferred a bed, someplace he could have her sprawled out beneath him, so he could have had his way with her, made this last for hours, if not days. But he wasn't going to complain, because the heat of her was threatening to send him over the edge as it was.
Faster,
she pleaded, and Dalton thought his head might explode. If we go faster, this is going to be over, darling, he admitted honestly.
Whatever it takes,
she said with a sweet chuckle.
Just please fuck me.
Oh, motherfucking hell. Katie Claren just dropped the F-bomb. Dalton knew he wasn't supposed to find that so fucking hot, but he did. Sweet little innocent Katie had a dirty mouth, and he wanted to ask her to talk some more, to tell him just what she wanted, but he didn't. Instead, Dalton eased down into the seat just a little, holding her ass up off his legs, her knees resting on the seat on each side of his hips. Don't move from right there, he instructed, meeting her eyes in the dark.
Okay,
she said, and he could see her grin. Without much room to gain traction, Dalton had to make do with what he had, so he began to thrust up inside her while digging his fingers into her hips. He didn't hold back, fucking her hard and fast as she moaned and whimpered, her head falling back. She was the sexiest woman he'd ever met in his entire fucking life, and taking her here in the back seat of his truck was the hottest thing he'd ever done, only because he was with her.
Dalton, yes. Oh, yes. Fuck me.
Dalton nearly exploded, seriously. Those words from her lips nearly launched him into the ether, but somehow he managed to keep himself grounded, unwilling to come until she did. Come for me, Katie. Come on my cock, darling. He was testing the waters, unsure how she would take him talking to her like that. But he didn't worry when she dug her fingernails into his shoulders, meeting his upward thrust with her own.